Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us inside the Americas. Here's a look at what's coming up in today's show. Donald Trump has faced almost daily protests since he first took office last month, but that's only made his diehard supporters even more determined to back him. Then, Haiti's prisons are in major decline, with poor hygiene, malnutrition, and overcrowding creating a perfect environment for disease and death. And Rio de Janeiro gears up for its world-famous Carnival, but with Brazil in the grips of its deepest recession in decades, locals are having to find cheaper ways to celebrate. I'm Jeannie Gallula. This week, the Trump administration got its second national security advisor in a month. Lieutenant General H.R. McMaster was named to replace Michael Flynn. Now, he was fired over his muddled explanations of communications with Russia's ambassador before Trump took office. The new nominee is seen as an outspoken, independent-minded soldier, widely admired for his leadership skills, but short on experience in Washington. McMaster's appointment reinforces the more mainstream approach to security that Trump's getting from Pentagon Chief Jim Mattis. He seems to be steering the administration towards stronger support for NATO and allies in Asia and away from more controversial Trump ideas like the reintroduction of torture in interrogations. Well, one chaotic month into his term, the popularity of the new U.S. president is at its lowest. There have been almost daily protests since Trump first took office in January, but his tumultuous first weeks in power have done nothing to put off his most fervent backers, as Jessica Lemazurier and Emerald Maxwell explain.
It's President's Day, and to mark the occasion, Donald Trump's critics have come out to protest. But so have his defenders.
Are you in America? I think so. You're in D.C. Guess what? He was elected by 31 out of 50 states. Yes, he is your president. You might not like it, but live with it.
Since arriving at the White House a few weeks ago, criticisms of the U.S. president have piled up. But his supporters aren't deterred. Ayman Youssef is Syrian-American, and he supports Donald Trump. He immigrated to the U.S. in the 1980s.
Many people on the island are happy with him because whatever he said before when he had his campaign, he started doing it.
What did you make of the fact that he put a ban on Syrians coming into the country? You're Syrian yourself.
Yes, I am. He's protecting the country.
Staten Island is the only borough of New York to have voted for Trump. Sal Oliva commutes into the city every day for his painting job near Trump Tower.
It affects me economically because I have to compete for cheap labor. So a lot of people were impacted by illegal immigration.
Sal's support for Trump has cost him dearly.
I've lost friends. I've had people stop talking to me I've known for years.
But Sal has no regrets. The new president is so far keeping his campaign promises on everything from immigration to putting America first. For his supporters, Trump is a man of his word.
I think he's really trying to get a lot of stuff done, and I think that's really good. I mean, he's not wasting time, messing around, thinking too much about it.
It's time that we start dealing with a number of issues, whether it's immigration or the deficit. There's all kinds of things that have to be dealt with that we have been avoiding.
It's this kind of support that Donald Trump is counting on. Last weekend in Florida, the president indulged himself by holding a large rally. A throwback to the glory days of campaigning.
Time now for our picture of the week. This is a Jewish cemetery in Missouri with more than 100 tombs defaced and vandalized. Several Jewish community centers across the U.S. said they received bomb threats this week as well. Many people are pointing the finger at the surge in right-wing populism. And after criticizing a Jewish reporter last week for bringing up the rise in anti-Semitism in the States, this week Donald Trump changed his tune. Julia Kim reports.
The gravestones of more than 100 Jews, vandalized. Chesed Shelemet Cemetery in University City, Missouri is the latest target in a recent wave of anti-Semitic incidents. As Americans celebrated President's Day, a Jewish community center in Wisconsin received its second bomb threat this year. This time it was Ivanka Trump who took to Twitter. Ivanka, who converted to Orthodox Judaism in 2009, shied away from calling the acts anti-Semitic. But some say there's been a notable increase in hostility towards Jews and that her father's administration is to blame.
There's so much anti-Semitism now with all the cabinet members. You can't put bigots and people with so much hatred in a cabinet and not have them think it's okay to hate everybody.
The president's chief strategist, Steve Bannon, was the former mouthpiece for the extreme right, which includes neo-Nazis and white supremacists. After criticizing a Jewish reporter last week for bringing up the rise in anti-Semitism, Donald Trump this Tuesday drastically changed his tune.
The anti-Semitic threats targeting our Jewish community and community centers are horrible and are painful and a very sad reminder of the work that still must be done to root out hate and prejudice and evil.
Anti-Semitism groups say at least 10 other Jewish facilities across the United States were threatened on President's Day, the fourth mass threat since the start of this year.
Our number of the week now is 42 people who have died this year alone in prisons in Haiti. Conditions in Haitian jails are in a continual decline, with poor hygiene, malnutrition, and overcrowding creating a perfect environment for diseases to spread. Alexander Okot reports.
Crammed shoulder to shoulder, the inmates are locked in their cells 22 hours a day. Haiti has by far the most congested prisons in the world. Sleeping 4 to a bunk with no latrines, the hot, humid conditions are perfect for disease to spread.
Every day, 4 or 5 people got killed. Right now, if you go up front, you see somebody right there on the floor. And later on, you came back, you see another one. Every day, somebody dying here, every day.
Malnutrition increases their vulnerability. While some are able to get food from outside, brought by family members, for example, the vast majority depend on meager rations provided by the authorities. Twice a day, they get little more than rice, oats, or cornmeal. The ward that houses the sick is overflowing. Dozens of emaciated men with sunken cheeks and protruding ribs lay silently, most too weak to stand.
Within this unparalleled environment, diseases spread quickly. We find many cases of scabies, beriberi, and tuberculosis. They catch all kinds of contagious diseases.
Recently, a mass funeral was held for some 20 inmates who died at Port-au-Prince Penitentiary. This woman was one of many who broke down on seeing the coffin of a loved one. Along with hunger, illness, and squalid conditions, inmates also have to deal with the mental torment of not knowing how long they'll have to stay. The vast majority of Haiti's 11,000 detainees have not been convicted of any crime and are in prolonged pre-trial detention.
In Colombia now, close to 7,000 FARC rebels have reached their designated demobilization zones around the country. The Marxist rebel group signed a peace agreement with the government late last year to put an end to Latin America's longest-running armed conflict that left more than 220,000 dead. Once in the zones monitored by the UN, the rebels can start handing in their arms before the deadline in June. The FARC will then be turned into a political movement 52 years after it first came into existence. Now, one of the biggest weeks in Brazil is finally here. From February 24th to 28th, Rio de Janeiro will host its world-famous Carnival. It's hoped the close to 1 million visitors coming to town will help bring Brazil some much-needed cash. But with the country in the grips of its deepest recession in decades, locals are having to find cheaper ways to celebrate.
When you think of Rio, you're sure to think of its world-famous Carnival. But with Latin America's largest economy in its worst recession for decades, partygoers are finding ways to celebrate the big Brazilian bash on a budget.
Last year, I bought a couple of costumes. This year, I will just buy one costume to wear every day of the carnival, because prices are a bit high.
With everyone tightening their belts, shop owners have been among the hardest hit. The carnival normally makes up a large part of their annual incomes.
January was dead. There were no sales. Things are starting to pick up a bit now that we're approaching the Carnival. We hope things will improve so we can at least match last year's Carnival sales.
Rio's tourism agency is hoping to attract 1 million foreign visitors this year. That number would bring in an estimated 920 million euros to the local economy.
The crisis is here, and it does interfere in some aspects of Carnival life, mainly the block parties. But fundamentally, Rio de Janeiro understands that Carnival is fantastic business for the city.
The event that has its origins some 300 years ago has long been the world's biggest carnival. In the face of recent austerity, it's hoped it will raise people's spirits, as well as plenty of much-needed funds.
Well, we'll leave you now with a tribute to Andy Warhol. The American pop artist died 30 years ago this week in New York. Decades after his death at just 58 years old, Warhol is still an icon of 20th century art, with his portraits and his style copied all over the world. He was a trendsetter in his private life as well, living openly as a gay man years before it became socially acceptable to do so, and coining that widely used expression, 15 minutes of fame. We'll leave you now with some of Andy Warhol's greatest work. Thank you so much for watching this Inside the Americas. We'll see you again next week for all the news from north to south.